Hello, and thank you for joining us for today's video. First, we want to tell you about a video we recently posted on our other channel. It's about hauntings that stem from disasters. It's an eerie and heartbreaking video about death and lost souls. Here's a short clip. Yet, perhaps the strangest paranormal occurrences in the aftermath of the quake started happening to cab drivers in the region 5 years after the disaster. In 2016, there began reports of outbreaks of phantom passengers amongst Japanese hacks in the coastal town of Ishinomaki. That area had nearly been wiped off the map by a swell of seawater. 3,000 of its residents were either dead or missing. One cab driver told a researcher from Tohoku University that he once picked up a young man in his 20s who climbed into the back seat of his cab. When the driver asked for a destination, the man simply pointed forward and said, "Hiyoriyama." The driver flipped on his meter and the fare began to uptick as he drove to the man's desired location. When he got to the outskirts of the area and pulled over, he was shocked and confused to find that there was no one in his cab at all. We'll have a link to the channel and the rest of the video at the end of this video. Before we start today's video, we want to talk about our amazing sponsor, Magellan TV. I'm always looking for something new to watch, and I love a good deal. That's why I love Magellan TV, which is a hidden gem in the streaming service market. It's great value in both price and quality. It's also the best streaming service for true crime fans. Magellan TV sponsors the best gathering for true crime fans, CrimeCon. They also have the best and largest collection of true crime documentaries that cover tons of different topics like unsolved mysteries, serial killers, infamous crimes, and so much more. I watched a riveting 2-part documentary on Magellan TV the other day called Lifers Behind Bars. I've honestly never seen a documentary quite like this before. It's about criminals, usually murderers, serving life in prison in the United Kingdom. The documentary crew had unprecedented access to the prison and the inmates. The inmates are very open about their crimes. What they say and how they feel about their crimes will probably shock you. This thought-provoking documentary is an absolute must-watch for true crime fans. Magellan TV has a huge collection of documentaries, and 20+ hours of new content is added every week. They also have series and documentaries that are available in 4K, and they are stunning. One of my favorite parts about Magellan TV? There are absolutely no ads. You should check out Magellan TV today because they have a great deal for criminally listed viewers. They are offering our viewers 30 days of free service. To get this amazing offer, go to try.magellantv.com/criminallylisted. Magellan TV also makes a great gift for the holidays, especially for those people who are hard to buy for. They have gift cards available now. Please check out Magellan TV today because you'll find something great to watch and you'll be supporting criminally listed in the process. Number 3. Mohammed Hussein. On December 1st, 2014, 58-year-old Mohammed Hussein and 53-year-old Roger Perry were shopping at the M&L Food Market in Miami Beach, Florida. Hussein was a married father of 2. Perry was considered a drifter. Perry had many items in his basket, and he went to the express checkout for customers with only a few items. Hussein confronted him about using the wrong checkout lane. Perry continued to unload his items as he argued with Hussein. Suddenly, Perry backhanded Hussein across the face. Hussein was knocked unconscious and he fell to the floor. When he landed on the floor, he struck his head. The impact fractured his skull and he started bleeding from the head. Perry fled from the grocery store. Hussein was rushed to the hospital and he was diagnosed with brain bleeding. After fleeing, Perry dyed his hair, gathered up some of his belongings, and left town. But 11 days later, he turned himself in. He was charged with felony battery. 58-year-old Mohammed Hussein lay in a coma for nearly 2 weeks. He was eventually taken off life support, and he died on December 13th. The charges against Perry were then upgraded to second-degree murder, but was later changed to manslaughter. At a court hearing, Perry said he suffered from bipolar disease and post-traumatic stress disorder. In October 2016, Roger Perry pleaded guilty to manslaughter. He was sentenced to 7 years in prison. Perry would have finished serving his sentence in 2021. Number 2. Brian Beebe and Robyn Glover. In July 1993, Robyn McClure and Brian Beebe moved into a rental property in Mill Creek, Washington. They converted the garage into a recreation room and installed some powerful, high-end speakers so they could listen to their music loud. Their neighbor, 43-year-old Martin Bellucci, did not like them playing loud music. Bellucci and his family had been living in the neighborhood for about a year. One day, shortly after McClure and Beebe moved in, McClure walked into his living room and found Bellucci there. Bellucci told him he didn't like the loud music. McClure apologized because one night they did play the music loud until 3 a.m. McClure tried to be reasonable with Bellucci. He said that they would only play the music until curfew, or if the music was too loud, Bellucci could call them and they would turn it down. Bellucci didn't want to do either. So McClure said that either he or Bellucci should talk to the police. Bellucci responded by saying, "I don't deal with the police. I deal with my own problems." He then left. Bellucci complained to several other neighbors about McClure and Beebe's loud music. On August 3, 1993, McClure came home from work in the early morning and then he left for school. When he came home, Brian Beebe was still sleeping. A friend from Seattle, Washington, 23-year-old Robyn Glover, was visiting and she was also asleep. Beebe was planning on becoming a registered nurse and he wanted to own his own business that provided care for people in their homes. Glover was a talented artist who had recently sold a few pieces of work. When McClure returned later that day, he went into the garage. He found 23-year-old Brian Beebe and 23-year-old Robyn Glover lying on the floor. They both had been shot in the head. McClure called 911 and paramedics came to the home. They checked for signs of life, but both 23-year-olds were dead. The police investigation quickly focused on 43-year-old Martin Bellucci, but when they went to question him, he was gone. They talked to his oldest daughter, and she said she saw her father enter McClure and Beebe's home. She heard a couple of loud bangs, and then she saw her father running from the house. The police collected the bullets that killed Glover and Beebe. They compared it to bullets found at Bellucci's workplace. It was determined that they were from the same batch. A warrant was issued for Martin Bellucci, but he was nowhere to be found. America's Most Wanted recorded a segment about him, which was set to air on November 2, 1993. But 3 days before it was going to air, Bellucci turned himself in. Bellucci was a self-employed machinist. After he turned himself in, his wife sent his toolbox and some of his machinery to an auction house. 35-year-old William Caldard, an auction supervisor, was going through the toolbox. He picked up a pen-like object and examined it. It turned out to be a homemade gun and went off in Caldard's hand. It fired a .25 caliber bullet through Caldard's thumb and into his heart. William Caldard died within minutes. He left behind a wife and 3 children. Martin Bellucci went to trial in September 1994. His lawyers said he was not guilty by reason of insanity. He supposedly suffered from paranoia. The prosecution said that Bellucci was not insane. Instead, Brian Beebe and Robyn Glover were playing loud music, and this upset Bellucci, so he murdered them. The jury deliberated for 5.5 hours. Bellucci was found guilty of 2 counts of aggravated first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He was never charged in connection with the death of William Calder. Martin Bellucci is not listed in the Washington State Department of Corrections database, so his current whereabouts and his status are unknown. Number 1. Chad Oulsen. Chad Oulsen was born in September 1970 in Alton, Illinois. He joined the Navy and served in Desert Storm. He won several awards for his conduct. After serving in the Navy, he worked as a finance manager at a motorcycle dealership in Sanford, Florida. Chad was big into motocross and dirt bikes. In early 2014, he had been with his wife, Nicole, for 7 years. The couple had a 22-month-old daughter, Alexis. On the afternoon of January 13, 2014, Chad and Nicole decided to see the movie Lone Survivor at the Cobb Grove 16 Theater in West Chapel, Florida. They left their daughter, Alexis, with a babysitter. Alexis wasn't feeling well, so Chad was texting with the babysitter. Sitting behind Chad and Nicole was 71-year-old Curtis Reeves and his wife. Reeves was a retired police chief and former SWAT captain. What exactly happened between the two men isn't clear because witness accounts differ. Just before the preview started, there was an announcement asking patrons to turn off their cell phones. Chad did not do this because he was still talking to the babysitter. Reeves said they politely asked him to turn off his cell phone. Nicole and several other people said that Reeves wasn't polite and it sounded like Reeves ordered him to turn off his phone. Chad explained that he was talking to a babysitter about his sick daughter and he continued to text. He possibly swore at Reeves. Reeves got up and started to walk down the row. He kicked the back of Chad's chair as he left. One patron said that Reeves was agitated and aggressive. Reeves walked out of the theater to speak to a manager. He returned a few minutes later, alone. By the time he had returned, Chad had put his phone away. Reeves got back into his seat and said to Chad he wouldn't have had to say anything to the manager if he knew Chad was going to put his phone away. Chad was annoyed that Reeves told the manager, and the two men exchanged more words. Chad stood up and either threw some of Reeves' popcorn or his bag of popcorn in his face. As seen on surveillance footage, Reeves immediately pulled out a .380 caliber handgun and pulled the trigger. Nicole's hand was on Chad's chest. The bullet struck her finger and went into her husband's chest. After shooting Chad, Reeves calmly sat down, put his gun in his lap, and stared straight ahead. An off-duty officer, who happened to be in the same theater, came and took the gun away from him. 43-year-old Chad Oulsen was taken to the hospital. He was pronounced dead hours later. Reeves was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. Reeves' lawyers argued that his actions were sheltered by Florida's controversial Stand Your Ground law. The law states that if a person reasonably believes their life is being imminently threatened, they can use deadly force instead of first retreating. In March 2017, there was a hearing if the charges against Reeves would be dismissed because his actions were protected under the Stand Your Ground law. The judge ruled that Reeves' actions were not protected by the law. However, he could argue self-defense when he went to trial. Because of appeals and motions filed by Reeves' lawyer and the pandemic, Reeves didn't go to trial until 8 years after the murder. During that time, Reeves had been under house arrest. Chad's family accused the lawyer of intentionally delaying the trial. When Curtis Reeves went to trial in February 2022, he was 79 years old. At the trial, an audio recording of Reeves' interview with the police was played. He said that Reeves kept yelling. Reeves said whatever he was saying was threatening. It was enough for me to look for a way out. My wife said we should have just moved. Reeves testified on his own behalf, and he said in all his years of law enforcement, including being a SWAT captain. He had never encountered someone so out of control. He also said, "No one has ever scared me. This guy scared me." He pointed out that he was a 71-year-old man with physical ailments, and Chad was 43, 6'4", and weighed 270 pounds. The prosecution argued that Reeves was not some fragile egg. Instead, he had an alpha male mindset. He liked ordering people around. He got an adrenaline rush from being a police officer and a SWAT commander. When Chad wouldn't do what he said, it challenged him. Then Chad threw popcorn in his face, and it humiliated him. So he murdered him. It was not an act of self-defense. The prosecution also pointed out that Reeves worked in the Robbery/Homicide Bureau, Fugitive Apprehension, and SWAT. During that time, he never fired his gun. But then he said an unarmed man in a movie theater with his wife was the scariest person he had ever encountered. The prosecution said that seemed unreal. The trial lasted just over 2 weeks. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. They found Curtis Reeves not guilty. Chad Oulsen's family was outraged by the verdict. A month after the verdict, Curtis Reeves spoke to ABC's Nightline. He said he felt sadness for Chad's family. He felt he had no choice but to defend himself in what he called the vicious attack. Reeves said, "I wish that none of this would have happened at all, but I don't feel like an instigator." Thank you so much for watching today's video. Please don't forget to check out our new channel, Paranormally Listed. There's a link on the screen now, and there's a link in the description box below this video. Well, that's all for today. Thanks again for watching.